The ranch had always been quiet in a way that felt earned. Not empty, not forgotten, just settled. Wide land stretching past the fence line, dirt roads shaped by years of tires and hooves, and a wooden ranch gate that marked a clear boundary between my life and the outside world. That gate wasn't decorative. It wasn't symbolic. It was practical, functional, and necessary. It was there to keep livestock in, strangers out, and order intact. When I first moved onto the property, the gate was already weathered, sun-bleached, and scarred from decades of wind and dust. I repaired it, reinforced it, and mounted it properly. It closed cleanly and latched tight. Anyone with common sense could see it was not meant to be driven through casually. Anyone with basic respect for private property would understand that instantly. The HOA president, however, seemed to operate under a different set of rules. The first time it happened, it felt unreal. I was sitting on the porch early in the morning, coffee in hand, watching the dust hang low over the fields as the day warmed up. That was when a vehicle came barreling down the dirt path that wasn't a road. It wasn't marked. It wasn't paved. It was my private ranch access. Before I could even process what I was seeing, the vehicle pushed straight through the closed gate. Wood splintered. Hinges screamed. Dust exploded into the air. The gate didn't stand a chance. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone got lost. Maybe they were turning around and panicked. I walked out to inspect the damage, still giving the benefit of the doubt. The gate was cracked, hanging at an angle, and one side of the fence line had been pulled loose. Tire tracks cut deep into the dirt, leading straight across my land toward the road on the other side. Later that day, I learned it wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a delivery driver. It wasn't an accident. It was the HOA president. She lived on the edge of the nearby development, the one that backed right up against my ranch. A development that had been built years after my property lines were drawn. A development governed by an HOA that believed order existed only where their rules applied. Somewhere along the way, she had decided that my ranch gate was inconvenient. Instead of driving the long way around on public roads, she had discovered that cutting through my land saved her time. And she had no intention of stopping. I repaired the gate again. Stronger this time. Thicker wood. New hinges. Clear signage. Private property. No through access. I assumed the message was obvious enough that it didn't need explaining. A few days passed peacefully. Then it happened again. This time, I wasn't on the porch. I heard it from inside the house. The unmistakable crack of wood under force, followed by the deep rumble of an engine accelerating away. When I reached the gate, the damage was worse. The latch had been ripped free. One post leaned dangerously. Fresh tire tracks carved a path through the grass beyond the fence, flattening a section of my wife's garden on the way through. That was the moment irritation turned into something heavier. This wasn't ignorance. This wasn't confusion. This was entitlement. Over the following weeks, the pattern became clear. Every few days, sometimes early in the morning, sometimes in the afternoon, the gate would be driven through. Sometimes it was repaired just enough to close again before being broken. Sometimes it was left hanging open, useless. Each time, the damage spread a little further. Fence posts loosened. Soil eroded. The cattle grew restless from unfamiliar vehicle noise cutting across their grazing paths. The HOA president treated my land like an extension of her neighborhood. Like an unofficial shortcut she had every right to use. I documented everything. Photos. Dates, times. Tire marks. Damage costs. I assumed logic would prevail if the issue was addressed. Formally. I reached out, not with anger, but with clarity. This was private property. This was causing damage. This needed to stop. Nothing changed. In fact, it got worse. The vehicles started coming faster, less careful, as if the resistance itself had become annoying. Dust clouds rolled across the porch more often. The gate barely lasted a week after each repair. One morning, I found it completely torn off and dragged several feet down the path. What struck me most wasn't just the destruction. It was the casualness of it. No hesitation. No attempt to slow down. No effort to avoid damage. Just straight through, every time. The ranch gate had become meaningless to her. Meanwhile, the HOA continued to send notices to their own residents about lawn height, mailbox colors, and driveway cleanliness. The irony wasn't lost on me. Rules were sacred, just not when they interfered with her convenience. The ranch had always been my boundary between peace and chaos. But now, that boundary was being violated on a schedule. I could have escalated things loudly. I could have argued. I could have turned it into a public feud. But as I stood there one evening, looking at the broken gate for the third time that month, a different thought settled in. If the gate didn't stop her, maybe something else would. Not through confrontation. Not through shouting. But through permanence. Something that couldn't be ignored. Something that didn't rely on courtesy or understanding. Something that didn't break when pushed. I stopped repairing the gate after that. I left it open, just long enough for her to feel comfortable again. And while she kept using my land like a shortcut, I quietly started planning one upgrade that would change everything. Leaving the gate open felt wrong at first. Every instinct I had told me to fix what was broken, to restore the boundary that had always existed between my ranch and the outside world. But this time, fixing the gate wasn't the solution. The gate had already proven it meant nothing to her. Repairing it again would only invite the same result, over and over, like resetting a problem that never learned its lesson. So instead, I watched. With the gate no longer standing in her way, the HOA president grew comfortable. The tire tracks through my land deepened and widened, forming a clear, worn path. The shortcut became routine. Dust clouds rolled through almost daily now. The cattle learned to scatter at the sound of an approaching engine. My wife stopped planting near that section of the property altogether. From the outside, it probably looked like I had given up. In reality, I was measuring everything. I mapped the exact path her vehicle took every time. I noted where she accelerated, where she slowed down, where she crossed the former gate line without hesitation. The pattern was consistent. She didn't look left or right. She didn't pause. She didn't expect resistance. The land, in her mind, had already been claimed as hers to use. That assumption became the foundation of my plan. I spent weeks researching property boundaries, county regulations, and agricultural safety installations. I made sure every step I was about to take would be legal, documented, and defensible. I wasn't interested in revenge for the sake of drama. I wanted permanence. I wanted something that would enforce reality without a single argument. That's when I settled on steel bollards. And most importantly, they didn't look like a gate. To the untrained eye, the entrance still appeared open. Wide enough. Clear enough. Familiar enough. The worn tire tracks leading straight through gave the illusion that nothing had changed. Installation took time. I hired professionals to dig deep footings, set reinforced concrete, and anchor the steel posts far below the surface. Each bollard was spaced carefully, wide enough to allow livestock and ranch equipment through when needed, but narrow enough to stop a vehicle completely. Everything was measured. Everything was deliberate. While the work was happening, the shortcut traffic didn't stop. She drove through daily, sometimes twice a day, unaware that the land beneath her tires was slowly becoming something else entirely. The contrast struck me every time. She was in a hurry. I was patient. By the time the bollards were ready, the area looked almost unchanged at a glance. No warning signs. No barricades. No bright paint. Just solid steel posts standing quietly where the gate once had been. I left them unmarked on purpose. Not to trick anyone, but because private property doesn't require decoration to be respected. The boundary existed whether she acknowledged it or not. The night before everything changed, I walked the line one last time. The concrete had cured. The posts were immovable. I tested them myself, applying force, pressure, weight. They didn't budge. Standing there in the quiet, I realized how strange it was that such a simple solution had taken so long to arrive. The next morning came like any other. Sun low in the sky. Light wind across the fields. Cattle grazing calmly in the distance. From the porch, I could see the shortcut path clearly now, etched permanently into the land. I waited without expectation, without tension. Then the dust appeared. The familiar vehicle approached at the same speed it always did. No hesitation. No braking. No awareness that anything had changed. She crossed onto my property the same way she had dozens of times before, assuming passage was guaranteed. The sound was different this time. It wasn't the crack of wood or the snap of hinges. It was solid. Sudden. Final. The vehicle came to an immediate stop. Dust billowed up and settled slowly, revealing the reality she hadn't prepared for. The shortcut had ended. The path she thought she owned had reached its limit. From where I stood, I didn't feel satisfaction the way people imagine it. There was no cheering. No fist pump. Just a quiet sense of resolution. The upgrade had worked exactly as intended. And now, the situation was no longer theoretical. The gate hadn't stopped her. But steel doesn't care about entitlement. The dust settled slowly, as if the land itself needed a moment to absorb what had just happened. The vehicle sat frozen where it had stopped, angled awkwardly between the steel bollards. For the first time in months, there was silence where there should have been an engine tearing across my property. Nothing about the scene felt dramatic. It felt inevitable. From my porch, I could see the clear outline of where entitlement had met something stronger. The worn shortcut path ended abruptly at the steel posts, and beyond them, my ranch continued undisturbed. The cattle hadn't even flinched. They kept grazing, as if they had always known this moment would come. The HOA president stayed in her vehicle for a long time. Long enough for the reality to sink in. Long enough to understand that this wasn't a broken gate she could push through or ignore. The land hadn't betrayed her. It had simply stopped cooperating. Eventually, the situation drew attention. Vehicles slowed on the public road nearby. Neighbors noticed the dust cloud that never moved on. The shortcut that had quietly existed in the background of the neighborhood's routine was suddenly exposed for what it really was, trespassing. By the time authorities arrived, everything had already been documented. Property boundaries were clear. The installation was legal. The damage history was extensive. Months of evidence told a story that didn't need embellishment or emotion to be convincing. What followed wasn't loud or chaotic. There were no raised voices, no dramatic gestures, no public spectacle. Just facts laid out in order. Repeated unauthorized access. Property damage. Ignored warnings. A lawful solution implemented on private land. For the first time, the HOA president wasn't in control of the narrative. The vehicle was removed. The shortcut was officially closed. And just like that, the daily intrusion stopped. No more dust clouds. No more tire tracks cutting through grass and soil. No more stress for the animals or frustration from watching boundaries be erased. The ranch returned to its natural rhythm. In the days that followed, I restored what had been damaged. Fence lines were reinforced. Soil was leveled. The garden was replanted in a new location, free from the threat of being flattened by someone else's convenience. The steel bollards remained, silent and unmoving, doing exactly what they were designed to do. The HOA changed too, in its own quiet way. Notices stopped coming from that direction. The development adjusted its routes. Residents took the long way around like everyone else. The unspoken understanding spread quickly: the ranch was not a shortcut, and it never had been. What struck me most was how little effort it took once the right solution was in place. Months of repairs, stress, and ignored complaints had led to a single permanent upgrade that ended everything instantly. The difference wasn't force or anger. It was clarity. Boundaries only work when they can't be ignored. Standing at the edge of the property one evening, watching the sun drop behind the fields, I realized something else too. The ranch felt whole again. Not just repaired, but respected. The land wasn't quieter because someone had been punished. It was quieter because order had been restored. The steel posts didn't symbolize revenge. They symbolized finality. No more negotiations. No more assumptions. No more shortcuts. Just a simple truth reinforced in steel and concrete: private property doesn't need permission to defend itself. And from that day forward, no one ever drove through my ranch again.